He shouldn't be alive. Not after what they did to him. Not after the fire, the needles, the silence. And yet, he's back. Bleeding, limping, staring up at a cabin that forgot his name. They took his vision. They broke his body. They erased his existence from every database. But they couldn't delete the one thing that made him dangerous. Memory. This spring, from the ashes of a buried military scandal, from the wreckage of a war no one wants to talk about, comes the story not of a man, but of the soldier he left behind. He has no voice, no rank, and no orders. Just a scent, a face, and a promise he was never supposed to keep. The war never ended for him, and now it's coming home. What if the most loyal soldier America ever created wasn't human? You think you've seen military thrillers. You think you've cried at dog movies. You haven't seen this. The Rex based on the viral true story. The dog they tried to erase. The bond they couldn't destroy. Before you move on, comment what you'd do if the thing you lost came crawling back through the snow. And get ready to meet the ghosts they never expected to come back. The moon hung low like a pale, silent witness over the compound. It cast long shadows across the chain-link fences, razor wire glinting in the cold night air like rows of jagged teeth. Inside a gray, featureless building tucked deep within the outskirts of Fort Zane, rows of reinforced kennels lined the corridor like jail cells. In the third cage from the end, a German shepherd with a grizzled muzzle and eyes, too, knowing for an animal lay still, unmoving except for his ears, which twitched at the faintest vibration. His name etched on a scratched metal plate above the bars was Rex. Officially, Rex had been retired. The records showed he'd been adopted by a family in Virginia. A happy ending. That was the story people liked. Reality was darker. Rex had not found a home. He had been classified psychologically unstable after service, a liability. No family wanted a war dog with a history of snapping during thunderstorms or growling at shadows. And so, like many others, he had been quietly redirected here. Facility 12A. Off the books. A place where retired canines were studied, poked, and repurposed. For whatever the government deemed necessary. Rex had once been a legend operating in tandem with Sergeant John Harper, a Marine renowned for walking into minefields and walking out alive, all because of the shepherd at his side. They had served 4 tours together, tracked explosives in the sandstorms of Al Anbar, pulled wounded from collapsed barracks, even sniffed out a hidden weapons cache beneath a children's hospital in Kabul. When John had taken shrapnel in the back, Rex had shielded him, standing guard for 7 hours before extraction. That bond, forged in fire, had once been unbreakable. But war is a machine that eats bonds for breakfast. When John left the service after a medical discharge and a mounting struggle with PTSD, he fought to adopt Rex. Paperwork buried. Denials stacked. They told him Rex had gone missing. In truth, the shepherd had been tagged, tranquilized, and loaded onto a black van bound for 12A. Now, years later, Rex lay in the dark, silent, watching, waiting. A distant door creaked open. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, measured, heavy. Not like the scientists, who shuffled. Not like the feeders, who moved quickly, guiltily. This was different. The man walked like a soldier. Rex's ears rose. The scent hit him before the figure even appeared. Not the sterile stench of antiseptic or rubber gloves. No, this was sweat, gunpowder, dried blood, and something else. Leather, oil, boot polish. His nostrils flared. Then, another scent, faint, old, but unforgettable. The sharp tang of battle adrenaline clinging to flesh. The iron musk of someone who had knelt beside dying men. It was almost impossible, but scents don't lie. It was John's boots. The man who passed by the cages wasn't John. He was younger, slimmer. A private, maybe. But his boots, those boots had been handed down or worn, torn near the arch. The stitching repaired with field thread, exactly the way John used to do it in country. Rex stood. For the first time in months, his tail twitched. The guard kept walking, humming low under his breath. But Rex didn't see him. He saw the blurred mirage of a battlefield, the sand kicking up, the sound of gunfire in the air, and a man yelling his name, not the command name, but the real one. "Stay with me, buddy. Just stay." He let out a low whine, almost involuntary. The humming stopped. The guard turned his head, brow furrowing. "You okay, old boy?" he said, approaching the cage. Rex did not growl. He did not back away. He simply stepped forward, eyes locking onto the boots. His nose twitched again. A memory, sharper than pain, rushed up through his spine. The exact spot above the heel, faint bloodstain. Faded, but there. Rex let out a bark, not aggressive, not warning, something else. A signal. A call. The guard jerked in surprise. "Hoa. Easy. You weren't supposed to be that active." He checked the clipboard. Sedative levels holding. "Guess you're just spirited tonight." Rex tilted his head. Eyes alert. Focused. The young man turned to leave, but Rex pawed the metal grate. Just once. A quiet knock. Deliberate. It was the same knock he'd used to signal John in the field when voice commands were too risky. The guard paused again. What the hell? But he didn't investigate further. He moved on. Boots clicking down the corridor, the scent fading with each step. Rex remained still long after the man had disappeared. His heart thundered in his chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, the fog in his brain began to lift. The sedatives they slipped in his food were weakening. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, not out of rebellion, but instinct. Something had told him to stop. Now he knew why. John was still out there. Or at least, something of him was. Something that still carried his trace. And if that scent was real, if those boots had walked into this place, then that meant there was a way out. Rex turned, padded to the corner of the cage, and began nudging a loose metal bracket with his snout. He'd been testing it for months. The screws had rusted. One good kick. But not yet. Not tonight. The stars were still in the wrong position. He lay down again, but this time not in surrender. His eyes didn't close. They watched the door. The scent still lingered, faint as a memory but alive. Somewhere, John Harper was still breathing, and Rex would find him. No matter how many fences stood in the way, no matter how many miles, even if it meant going through hell again. The rain came without warning, thudding against the tin roof of Facility 12 like 1,000 fists. Outside, floodlights flickered under the strain of wind, casting staccato shadows across the compound yard. Inside, the air shifted thick with ozone, tension, and something that had not existed in Rex's mind for months, intent. The plan had formed the night he smelled those boots. Not consciously, not like a human would craft a scheme with paper and pen, but with primal calculation. The way predators stalk prey. The way soldiers, backed into corners, make moves no enemy expects. Tonight was the right night. Weather like this always caused short staffing. Key staff would stay home. Some doors would be left unlocked, others powered by generators with limited fuel. Chaos made excellent cover. All he needed was the right trigger. In his cage, Rex had spent the last 40 minutes pacing, low and slow, his breathing steady, his focus razor thin. On his left paw, he had gnawed at the joint just enough to raise skin, drawing the tiniest bead of blood. Nothing serious. But it would catch a handler's attention if timed right. He lay back down and waited. Not long after, a pair of boots returned, same cadence, same soldier. The younger one. The one with John's boots. Still not eating, huh? The boy muttered, flicking his flashlight beam over Rex's form. Rex waited. The light swept down and froze. Shit. Is that blood? Perfect. The boy moved closer, kneeling by the cage. Are you hurt? He asked, more to himself. Damn it, hold on. He radioed in the injury, voice tense but not panicked. Standard protocol. Possible infection, maybe a tear. Either way, Rex would be moved. And they would take him where all unstable, damaged dogs were sent for observation, the temporary isolation ward, down the East Wing. It had fewer guards. Less tech. No surveillance inside cages. Just tired staff and rainy windows. For most dogs, it was a holding pen for sedation and evaluation. For Rex, it was the beginning. 2 orderlies arrived within 10 minutes. One held the leash, the other prepped the crate. Rex didn't resist. He kept his head down, tail limp, breath shallow, playing injured just enough to not raise suspicion, but not so convincing they'd sedate him immediately. That was the line he needed to walk. The crate was wheeled down the corridor, past howling cages and fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead like mechanical hornets. Every scent along the way told Rex a story: chemical fear, stale kibble, the bitter tang of bleach, the emptiness of dogs that had given up long ago. The East Wing smelled different. Older. Forgotten. As the crate rolled over uneven tile, Rex's ears picked up the subtle shift in echo, the soft click of mechanical locks overridden by manual bolts. They entered isolation. No cameras. No biometric scanners. Only old locks and tired men with coffee-stained scrubs. Put him in Bay 4, one of them said, stifling a yawn. Make sure it's latched this time. Last week, one of EM slipped through and wrecked the whole med tray. Copy, said the orderly. This one's calm, though. Barely made a sound. Rex didn't even blink. The crate opened. The leash tightened. He was led into a steel kennel with a grated front and a metal floor. The door slammed shut behind him. No padlock. Just a latch. Easy. As soon as the footsteps retreated, Rex sat still. He counted. Not in numbers, but in rhythm. The sound of boots, the pause for coffee. The door hinge creak. Then silence. He moved. With a calculated nudge of his shoulder, he dislodged the latch bar, just enough to wedge his paw beneath it. Pressure. Twist. The bar shifted again. Another push. The door didn't swing open, but it groaned. He stopped. Too soon. Too loud. Another count. Then the low whine of a generator choking somewhere above. Lights flickered. Rex's pupils widened to compensate. Now. He pushed hard. The door didn't open all the way, but enough for a body like his, trained, lean, deliberate, to squeeze through. He crouched, twisted, and slipped free into the dim hallway. The walls sweated with moisture, rain hammering the window at the far end. The place reeked of mold and metal. Most dogs would have panicked here. But Rex didn't panic. He listened. One set of footsteps to the left, distant, approaching, the shuffle of sneakers. Not a threat. He slunk to the right instead, toward the staff exit. He knew it from months of observation, the door by the janitor closet. He had memorized the path like a map of survival. The exit was chained, but not locked, just looped for deterrence. Humans trusted appearances. Rex didn't. He pawed at the lowest link, pushed his weight forward, and heard the satisfying clink of chain giving way. The door creaked open, just wide enough to slip into the storm outside. Rain slammed into his coat, matting fur instantly. The wind cut sideways, carrying the scent of trees, fuel, freedom. He sprinted. Not blindly. Every direction was calculated smell, sound, vibration under his pads. The forest line ahead would cover him from the outer cameras. The lightning would distort thermal sensors. He bolted toward the tree line, each paw step landing with precision. Behind him, an alarm hadn't yet triggered. No one had noticed. He reached the woods in under 2 minutes, disappearing into shadow. But he didn't stop. He had to put distance between himself and the facility. 1 mile. 2. By the time he reached the crest of a moss-covered ridge, soaked and shivering but alive, he slowed for the first time. He turned back. No lights in pursuit. No sirens. Only rain. He was free. But he knew better than to celebrate. This was just the first gate. The road ahead wasn't just wilderness. It was over 100 miles of towns, highways, and risk. And somewhere beyond it all, perhaps not even knowing Rex was alive, was John Harper. And now, Rex was coming home. The forest faded behind him as dawn broke, slashing through the clouds with pale gold fingers. Mud clung to Rex's paws, drying in patches under his thick coat as he moved, swift and silent, through the ditches and forgotten roads at the edge of the county. He didn't pause to rest. Every breath was measured, every sound analyzed. The city was still distant, but signs of life. Rex avoided the main roads with surgical precision, veering instead into small alleys, rusted fences, disused railways. What seemed like random turns, detours only a wild animal would take, had an eerie logic. Rex was retracing a rhythm embedded deep in his mind. Years ago, Sergeant Harper had trained him to recognize and memorize patrol patterns. In Afghanistan, their daily walks before sunrise followed a unique path, twisting through barriers, up narrow hills, across terrain riddled with unpredictability. John had always said it trained focus, discipline, control under pressure. "We don't take the easy road, buddy," he used to mutter, patting Rex's head. "Easy's where they expect us." Now, in a landscape far from war zones and battlefields, Rex was recreating that very path. A left at a rusted signpost covered in ivy. A slow crawl beneath a chain-link fence torn near the bottom. A pause by a broken water tower where pigeons cooed from the rafters above. It made no sense to a passing human. Each turn tugged at a place in his brain where instinct blurred into memory. Each route felt like muscle memory from a life gone by. If anyone had watched him closely, they might have seen the hesitation in his stride each time he passed a familiar curve. He wasn't just moving forward. He was looping inward, spiraling down into the echo chamber of his own past. In the back alleys of Norbridge, where brick buildings slumped under the weight of abandonment, Rex slipped unseen. The few people awake at this hour paid no mind to a muddy dog with a limp. It was here, at the corner of 6th and Railman Avenue, that his first true test arrived. Sirens. 2 blocks ahead, blue and red strobes lit up the street, bouncing off wet pavement. A pair of officers moved along the sidewalk, checking underparked cars, calling for a loose animal. Someone must have reported him. Rex ducked into a loading dock behind an abandoned storefront. The stench of old motor oil and rat droppings filled his nose. He waited, heartbeat still, breath low. The sirens grew louder. Then, out of nowhere, a human voice, cracked and slurred, whispered behind him. Hey, pup, you looking for a hole out of here?" Rex turned, every muscle tensing. The man before him was hunched, wrapped in a tattered army surplus jacket 3 sizes too big. His beard was wild, his skin weathered and cracked like old leather. But there was something familiar, not in his face but in his smell. Gunpowder. Dirt. Adrenaline soaked into his pores like a tattoo. Military. The man stepped slowly forward, his hands raised. "You ain't regular, are ya? I know those eyes. You've seen stuff. You're one of the trained ones." Rex didn't growl, didn't run. Instead, he watched. The man dropped to one knee with effort, groaning as his body adjusted to the movement. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a rusted can of tuna. "Stolen from a dumpster," he muttered. "Still better than what they fed us in Kandahar." At that word, Kandahar, Rex's ears twitched. The man noticed. "Yeah, you know that name. Of course you do." He opened the can, set it down between them, and leaned back. "I had a buddy," the man said, staring at nothing. "Name was Harper. Sergeant. Saved my ass more times than I can count. Big, stubborn bastard. Had this dog, smart as hell. Wouldn't let anyone near him but Harper." Rex didn't move. The man sighed, rubbed his temples. "I think I knew that dog. I think maybe you are him." The rain returned in a soft drizzle, whispering on the metal roofing above. Rex stepped forward and sniffed the air around the man's wrist. Faint scars, nerve tremors, burn residue, and underneath it all, a memory. The same tent, the same sand. Suddenly the man's hand jerked to his temple in an unthinking automatic motion. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Sometimes I forget what year it is. Sometimes I think we're still over there, still trying to get out." He looked down at the dog beside him. "Funny thing is, I don't remember my own name half the time. They say I was with Unit 24B, the one that got ambushed in the hills outside Marja. Docs say the explosion scrambled me good, but I remember Harper. I remember the damn dog that kept barking until someone dug me out of the rubble." "It was you, wasn't it?" Rex pressed his body against the man's leg, not fully but enough, the way he used to when John was on edge. Just pressure. Presence. The man sucked in a shaky breath, eyes glassy. "You're not just any dog." Sirens grew nearer. Voices echoed around the block. The man blinked hard. "All right, soldier, time to vanish." He stood with effort, looked around, then pointed to a storm drain near the dock wall. "That tunnel cuts under 2 streets. Comes out behind St. Luke's Chapel. No cameras. You'll lose them for sure." Rex looked at him one last time, deep, unmoving. The man saluted again. "Semper Fi, pup." Without a sound, Rex moved. He squeezed through the grate, paws clanging against wet steel, and disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel. Behind him, the man limped back into the shadows, laughter echoing faintly behind his words. "John Harper, you lucky bastard. He's still looking for you." Inside the tunnel, the echoes swallowed Rex whole. Water dripped in rhythmic pulses. The scent of damp stone and rust mixed with the faint aroma of a nearby bakery's trash. But through it all, one scent remained strongest. The memory of fire-warmed wool, blood on denim, sweat in sandstorms. The loops in Rex's mind were no longer just echoes. They were a map, a trail back. And it was leading him somewhere. Fog clung to the treetops like breath held too long. The forest groaned under the weight of morning dew, each branch dripping in silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of a squirrel or the caw of a distant crow. Far from the buzz of roads and cities, a small wooden shack sat crooked against a hill, half swallowed by moss and time. Its tin roof had long since begun to sag. A chimney leaned like it was tired of standing, and the windows were fogged with grime. Inside, wrapped in layers of wool and silence, John Harper stirred. His bed was no more than a cot propped up by bricks and milk crates. On the nightstand beside him sat a dull knife, a cracked picture frame of 2 young Marines smiling in desert camo, and a bottle of painkillers missing its label. John's eyes blinked open, not from a restful sleep, but from a scream, his own voice echoing into the cold air. The name tore through his throat like sandpaper. Then silence again. John sat up slowly, wiping sweat from his brow, his chest rising in shallow, unsteady breaths. The name meant something. He could feel it burning at the back of his mind like a match never struck. But the second he tried to hold on to it, it slipped away like water through calloused fingers. He stared at the wall, waiting for the tremors in his hands to stop. They didn't. He didn't remember shouting, he never did. But every night, the same thing. And every morning the same forgetting. Rex. He didn't know who Rex was anymore, but the name haunted his dreams like a ghost with teeth. The kettle in the corner hissed on the wood stove. He moved slowly toward it, dragging his left leg, the one still filled with metal from shrapnel. He poured 2 mugs of black instant coffee, then blinked, confused. Why 2? He looked at the second mug for a long time, then dumped it without a word. It was the 4th day that week he'd done that. He stepped outside onto the porch. The forest loomed in every direction. The nearest town an hour's hike away, down a trail no one used. His beard was thick, streaked with gray. His flannel shirt hung off him like wet cloth on a scarecrow. He didn't look like a war hero, he looked like someone the world had left behind. And in many ways, it had. After the medical discharge, he tried everything. VA clinics, group therapy, EMDR. But nothing made the noise stop. The flashbacks were sandstorms, blinding, suffocating. He could barely hold a conversation without drifting into silence, lost in the desert of memory. So he came here to forget. But forgetting didn't work the way they promised. He stepped back inside and opened a drawer beneath the stove. Inside lay a revolver, oiled, loaded, untouched for weeks. His fingers hovered over it. He didn't need to look to know how much it weighed. He'd memorized its gravity. He closed the drawer. 3 times he had held it to his temple. 3 times he had pressed the barrel to his chest, trembling, breathless. And 3 times, something had stopped him. Once, it was the sound of claws scratching at the door. Sharp, frantic, like something alive was demanding to be let in. Another time, it was a low howl, mournful and distant, cutting through the silence like a memory begging to be heard. The 3rd time, when he'd gone as far as placing his finger on the trigger. Each time, when he opened the door to see, there was nothing there. No tracks. No fur. Just cold air. And a strange weight in his chest, like grief that didn't belong to him. He had no dog. Never had one. At least, that's what he told himself. He sat at the table, his hands cupped around the mug, eyes scanning the peeling wallpaper, the stains on the ceiling. The house smelled like wood smoke and old leather. He didn't decorate, didn't listen to music. The only sound came from the old battery radio that picked up a single station broadcasting weather and war memorials. Sometimes they played old military field reports. Sometimes that was worse than silence. He turned the dial slowly. In other news, the controversial K-9 retirement program remains under investigation after leaked footage of classified testing facilities was published online. John froze. His fingers gripped the table. Something sparked behind his eyes. A flicker, but like a dying bulb, it faded before he could make sense of it. That name again, rising from nowhere. He stood suddenly, the chair scraping harsh against the floor, the movement too sharp for his battered hip. He winced, but didn't sit down again. Instead, he walked to the shelf, pulling down a rusted metal box labeled Deployment 24B. He hadn't opened it in years. Inside lay medals, letters, maps, photos yellowed with time. He sifted through them like a man searching for someone else's life. Then, at the bottom, an ID tag. K-9 Rex. Bandler. SGT. John Happer. Unity 24B. Observation. The breath left his lungs. He stared at the tag, hand shaking. The name wasn't just a name. It was real. It had always been real. The memories crashed over him like waves slamming against brittle bone. Sand, blood, the weight of fur against his shoulder during gunfire. A bark that always came half a second before danger. Eyes that never blinked under pressure. Rex, his dog, his partner. Gone. No, they had told him the dog had been adopted, gone to a good home, but the tag was never returned, and neither was the sense of peace that dog had once given him. He stumbled back, gripping the table to steady himself. Something stirred outside. His head turned. A shape barely visible disappeared between the trees. Too quick to be a man. Too silent to be a bear. Four-legged. The coffee mug slipped from his hand and charadered against the floor. His pulse roared in his ears. He stepped toward the door, hand hovering near the latch. Then, a single scratch. Deliberate. The same sound as before. But this time, it wasn't a hallucination. This time, something was on the other side of that door. Waiting. Watching. The scratching at the door didn't stop. It came in slow, deliberate rhythms. 3 rakes, a pause, then 2 more. Then silence, then again. Not frantic like an animal in fear. Not erratic like a raccoon or coyote, but measured, intentional. John stood frozen on the other side, hand hovering over the doorknob. His breath came shallow. Every instinct in his body told him not to open it, but something deeper, older, perhaps buried in a part of his... He turned the lock. The hinges creaked as he opened the door into the fog-drenched morning. At first there was nothing, just the forest dripping and still. The trees stood like sentries in the mist. Then, movement. A shape emerged, slow and cautious, from behind the thick brush. Low to the ground, soaked in mud, eyes glowing faintly amber in the gray light. A dog. Large. German shepherd. Scowled across the muzzle, a limp in its left hind leg. John staggered backward. He whispered, clutching the doorframe, "Not now. Not like this." He hadn't taken his sedatives in 2 days. Not since the radio broadcast had jolted something awake in him. Withdrawal hit harder this time. Cold sweats, trembling hands, fragmented memories looping behind his eyes like old film reels melting under heat. He blinked and the dog remained real, or close enough. "You're not here," he muttered, stepping back inside, leaving the door ajar. "You're not real. I'm seeing things again. Just another damn dream wearing daylight skin." Rex didn't move for a full minute. He stood there, watching the man who once meant everything, who once ran through hell and fire with him. The smell was the same. John's scent, though dulled by time and medication, still clung to the air like smoke. Rex stepped forward, one paw, then another. He crossed the threshold, careful not to make sudden movements. Eyes locked on the man in the doorway. John watched him come closer, breathing hard. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "You look like him. You look just like..." No, he's gone. They told me he was adopted. They wouldn't have lied about that, would they?" Rex stopped 2 feet from John. He lowered his head, ears tucked back, and gently placed his chin on the man's boot. The contact was subtle, a whisper from the past, a code between soldiers. The same gesture he used to make after every mission, when the adrenaline wore off and all they had left was each other. John froze, his mouth parted but no words came. His eyes stared down at the dog's head, the pressure of it, the warmth seeping through the boot leather into his bones. Then something in him snapped. He jerked his foot away violently, eyes wild with confusion and panic. "You're not real," he said, stumbling back. "You're not real. I know what this is. It's the pills. It's my brain. I'm cracking again." Rex flinched but didn't retreat. He tilted his head, one ear rising confused. He took a cautious step forward. "Stay back," John barked, his voice cracking. "Don't play with me. I can't." Rex moved in anyway, slowly, surely, and pressed his body against John's shin, like he used to, the weight grounding, the pressure intentional. 1,000 nights of memory lived in that touch. John swayed, his knees buckled slightly, and he gripped the table to steady himself. "You buried you," he whispered. "Or I should have. I let you go. I had to." But Rex didn't understand words like grief or guilt. He only knew the man he'd been searching for smelled of home. He only knew that this was the one who used to whisper to him under flares, the one who fed him from his own hands when rations ran low. So he did what he always did in moments of silence between storms. He licked the man's hand once. John's body recoiled. "Stop it," he hissed, blinking rapidly. "I'm not strong enough to see ghosts." His breathing turned ragged. His pupils dilated. His hands shook. In a final burst of confusion and desperation, he shoved the dog away with both palms to the chest. Rex stumbled back a few steps, not hurt. Then it happened. Rex moved again, a bit faster this time, perhaps in instinct, perhaps in memory. He attempted once more to close the space between them, to make John feel, to trigger whatever was locked inside the soldier's fractured mind. But John, overwhelmed, shifted his foot wrong. Rex jerked back with a sharp yelp, not pain but reflex. His head snapped instinctively. His teeth grazed the skin. Just a nip, nothing serious, but enough. John shouted and collapsed into the chair behind him. A thin line of blood appeared on his ankle, trailing downward in slow rivulets to the top of his foot. The drop hit the wooden floor like a punctuation mark. Then he saw it. His leg. The scar. A long, pale mark running from ankle to calf. The same wound he got during an IED blast when Rex had pulled him out of the wreckage. They'd treated him under a tent with a bottle of whiskey and 3 field stitches. And afterward, in the silence, Rex had laid his head on that leg, right on top of that wound for the next 4 nights straight. John stared at the blood. Then the dog. Then the scar. Something uncoiled in his chest, slow, painful, like a locked box groaning open. Images returned, not in full clarity but in fragments. The scent of diesel and sand, the sound of a bark cutting through gunfire, the weight of a muzzle on his knee as he cried into the dark. He reached forward, hand trembling. But Rex stepped back this time. The movement wasn't angry. It was cautious. The way a soldier scans a perimeter that used to be safe. John's mouth moved, but no sound came. His fingers hovered in the air, halfway between now and then. Rex looked at him, not with fear, not with pain, but with something harder to define. Recognition, blurred by time. Then, without a sound, he turned and padded slowly toward the open door. John sat frozen, eyes wide, the blood from his ankle pooling into the grooves of the floorboards. He wanted to speak. He wanted to scream the name that had haunted his dreams. But all he could do was whisper, like a man standing on the edge of memory. Rex. And by then, the dog was already gone. The air inside the cabin grew heavier in the days that followed. Dust flated through shafts of fading light like memory fragments refusing to settle. John hadn't spoken a word aloud since the morning he watched the dog disappear into the mist. He hadn't stepped beyond the porch. He hadn't touched food. The small mirror above the sink revealed the gaunt shadow of a man unrecognizable even to himself. Yet something in him had cracked that day, quietly, invisibly. A fracture too deep for bandages, too familiar to ignore. It wasn't the blood on his ankle that haunted him. It wasn't even the fear. It was the way the dog looked at him before leaving, like it knew everything, and still waited to be seen. Rex didn't go far. He lay just beyond the tree line, down the slope where the pine needles softened the ground. For 3 days he didn't hunt, didn't move except to reposition himself when the wind changed. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He simply stared at the cabin door with an intensity that burned through fog and hunger. He knew better than to force his way back. This wasn't about strength. It was about timing, about loops. And loops, like memory, always return. John spent most of his time sitting at the table, nursing mugs of cold coffee, staring at the dog tag he'd unearthed. On the 3rd night, he opened the rusted deployment box again, digging through the artifacts with a kind of reverent hesitation. A USB drive clattered out of a yellowing envelope marked Camp Greyline, May 2012. He didn't recognize it, or maybe he did deep down. His fingers fumbled as he inserted it into the old laptop he hadn't powered on in years. The screen flickered, sluggish, coughing up digital dust before revealing the directory. He clicked on the first file. The video crackled to life with the grainy texture of outdated camcorders. A field, tall grass, barking in the distance. Then a voice, his own. "All right, partner, sniff it out." The camera panned to a younger version of John crouched beside a sleek German shepherd, both of them framed by sunshine and dirt. The dog's tail wagged with focus, eyes locked on the dummy scent buried beneath the crate. The camera zoomed as Rex found the target in under 20 seconds. "Atta boy," John's voice rang clear through the static. "That's my soldier." John stared at the screen, unmoving. The next video auto-played. This one was darker, an evening drill, gunfire sounds, flashbang simulations. Rex never flinched. He moved like liquid fury, leaping over obstacles, crawling under fences, returning to John's side without command. They were one organism split into two bodies. The final clip froze on an image, John kneeling with his arms around Rex's neck, cheek resting on the dog's head as both looked toward the desert horizon. And something inside him shattered. He didn't cry loud. He didn't even breathe differently. But the tears fell like rain on scorched earth. Silence, relentless, real. 6 years of silence broke on his cheeks like waves against cliffs, carving canyons through unspoken pain. His shoulders shook once, then again, then completely. "God, I left you," he whispered into the screen. "They told me you were gone. I believed them." Outside, Rex's ears perked. Not at the sound, but at the shift in air. The loop had bent. The moment had changed. John wiped his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed by emotion he didn't know he still had. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the kind of stare that looks straight through the roof and into the past. That night, for the first time in a long while, he didn't reach for the drawer with the gun. The fourth night arrived quietly. John collapsed into bed without dinner, too drained to keep the radio on, too numb to fight the fatigue clawing through his limbs. Sleep came like a drug, but dreams refused to let go. He was in the field again. The sky above him was ash gray, gunfire in the distance, a body beside him. Not human. Fur, blood. Eyes wide open but still breathing. His hands reached toward it, screaming the name over and over. "Rex, Rex, Rex." His voice echoed off invisible walls, louder, more urgent, until it wasn't just in the dream anymore. He sat bolt upright in bed, chest heaving. The cabin was dark, silent. Then came the sound. A single bark. Not loud, not desperate, but filled with something ancient. Recognition. Outside, Rex had heard the name spoken with truth, not confusion. With heart, not doubt. He stood now, muscles taut, ears high, body alert. His tail didn't wag. This wasn't joy. This was purpose. Inside, John moved to the door, still breathless, still unsure if this too was a dream. He opened it slowly. The fog had returned, thicker than before, wrapping the forest in cotton silence. But just beyond the steps, barely visible in the glow from the wood stove inside, was the silhouette. Wait. John didn't step out. He knelt. The dog didn't move. And neither did John. The world hung in that stillness, heavy with the weight of everything they hadn't said, everything they hadn't remembered. Somewhere deep in the forest, an owl cried. Then, a whisper from John's lips, soft, broken. Red. Another bark. This time louder. Steadier. The kind of bark that used to mean all clear. The forest felt different the next morning. The mist no longer whispered memories gone. It clung tight to the trees like a warning. The leaves barely rustled. Even the birds held their breath. John noticed it the moment he stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand, eyes sharper now, the fog inside his head having begun to lift after days of forced stillness. Beside him, Rex sat poised, ears flicking subtly in every direction, nose twitching at scents only he could decipher. They had begun rebuilding something, wordless but real. Trust returned not in grand gestures but in micro-decisions. John leaving the door open, Rex sleeping closer to the steps, both of them breathing a little easier, even if only by inches. But the silence this morning wasn't peace. It was surveillance. 20 miles away, in a windowless van parked along a logging road that hadn't seen traffic in years, a man sat in front of 6 monitors, each displaying various infrared scans of the northern sector of the Pine Ridge Forest. He was lean, black-clad, face partially obscured by a tactical mask. On the screen, a blinking red dot pulsed on a canine-shaped signature. Beside it, a human figure, body tap normal, stationary. The man didn't speak. He tapped a sequence into the terminal, activating the uplink to Central Command. "Target reacquired," he said, voice distorted by the comms rig. K9R17 located, confirming presence of potential interference. Subject JH72 presumed inactive. A voice crackled in response. Calm, almost casual. "You are to neutralize and retrieve. No press, no signature." K9R17's neural node still contains Phase 3 mappings from the Greyline prototype run. Data was never transferred. "We need that cortex clean, Agent. No trace." The man nodded, unplugged the uplink and reached for his case. Inside lay an M98B sniper rifle, custom modified for silent kills. Alongside it, tranquilizer darts, neuroblockers agents, and a syringe filled with a fast-degrading acid compound. His mission wasn't just to retrieve Rex. It was to erase him. Back at the cabin, Rex stood suddenly and stared toward the southern tree line. John noticed instantly. "You is it?" he whispered, already stepping back inside. He returned moments later with an old Pelican case, its hinges rusted but lock still intact. He flipped it open on the porch and revealed what years of silence hadn't made him forget. A 308 bolt-action rifle, scope calibrated to 0 at 600 yards, suppressor wrapped in oilcloth. John handled it like an extension of his own body. His movements were clean, familiar. Rex's stare never shifted. "Yes on something?" John muttered, scanning the tree line with practiced ease. "Talk to me, buddy." Rex took a step forward, low growl in his throat, his muscles tensed, his entire body locked into the posture John remembered from patrol, perimeter alert, the kind of stillness that always came seconds before hell broke loose. John didn't need a second warning. He dropped to one knee and lifted the scope. Through the crosshairs, movement shimmered, barely noticeable to the untrained eye. A distortion near a boulder, then a glint, not from metal, but glasscope's lens reflection, too quick to be natural. He blinked once, then adjusted his aim higher. The shot would be long. Unfriendly terrain. Minimal wind. But he'd made worse under fire. He exhaled. A crack broke through the morning air, not loud but unmistakable. Through the scope, the shimmer collapsed sideways. Then another movement, quick, sudden. The shimmer stood again. No blood. "Damn it," John growled. Whoever it was, but he was better. He chambered another round, but before he could fire, the agent disappeared behind the ridge, retreating with a level of control that spoke volumes. This wasn't a poacher or random hunter. This was a professional. John stood, face grim. He turned to Rex. "You're not done, are they?" Rex didn't look away from the trees. Hours later, back inside, John booted the laptop again and dug deeper into the files stored from his last deployment. He searched K9R17 and found nothing. But Greyline pulled a hit. A classified document, buried under field logs, misfiled under a training database. Title: Project Greyline, Sensory Reconstruction for Battlefield Canines. The text was fragmented, some lines corrupted, but the parts that remained chilled him. Embedded neural accelerators to enhance environmental response patterns. Field testing suggests memory persistence extends beyond training parameters. Prototype K9R17 exceeded expectations, but posed retention risks. John stared at the last line. That said, subject was never cleared for decommission. Suggested protocol, asset retrieval and cortical reset. He closed the lid slowly. They never meant to retire Rex. They meant to erase him. The training wasn't just physical. They had implanted something, data, response enhancements, perhaps even reactive patterns tied to neural mapping, and they left that in his brain. And now, because Rex had escaped, they were coming back to clean the mess. John leaned back in the chair, breath steadying. Philip said, "That's why you were locked up." Rex lay beside the door now, ears twitching in sync with every groan of wind outside. He hadn't eaten since the day John pushed him away. Food remained untouched, water bowl full, but he stayed. John walked over and sat beside him, back pressed against the wall. He didn't speak, just rested his hand gently on Rex's shoulder. The dog didn't flinch. For the first time in years, they sat together without noise or need. Outside, the forest held its breath. But somewhere beyond those trees, another agent was already inbound. The night crept in without warning, as if the sun had not set but simply vanished, sucked out of the sky by something more deliberate than nature. The wind died with it, leaving the forest eerily still, too quiet, like a held breath before a gunshot. John crouched beside the fireplace, not bothering to light it. Every sense was on edge. Rex lay near the door, unmoving, but his ears were up, body taut like a coiled spring. They both felt it. Something was wrong. John reached into the old ammo box beneath the floorboard, pulling out a second rifle, the M4 with thermal scope. He hadn't touched it in years, but his hands remembered every groove, every click. No words passed between man and dog. There was no need. They had lived this before, not in this forest but halfway across the world, in a compound surrounded by hills and dust, where silence meant death and shadows had names. Then it began. A faint shuffle in the leaves to the north. Then another softer from the east. Rex's head snapped toward the sound before John even moved. His low growl rumbled through the floor like distant thunder. John stepped outside into the darkness, eyes scanning the tree line, fingers steady on the trigger. The moon had ducked behind the clouds, only shapes and memory remained. Every muscle in his body locked into its old rhythm. One step, hold breath, wait for the second crunch. Just like before. Then it hit him, not just the tension, not just the layout, but the pattern. It was identical. The way the enemy moved, the spacing between the sounds, the flanking tactic, the triple arc movement through dead brush. This wasn't coincidence. This was taught. He had lived through this formation 10 years ago in a sand pit north of Fallujah. It was the night they were ambushed. The night Rex took shrapnel to the shoulder and still dragged him out. The exact same pattern. John dropped to one knee behind a boulder near the shed, scope rising to his eye. Through the lens, a thermal signature shimmered into view. A humanoid figure, sleek, crouched low, moving with inhuman patience. Behind it, another, then a third. He muttered, "They're not just tracking us, they're recreating the ambush." He fired the first shot, not to kill but to scatter. The forest exploded in motion. Rex bolted from the porch without command, launching into the dark like a missile, jaws bared. John moved after him, switching to cover fire, aiming low to disable. But these were not foot soldiers. They responded like ghosts, disappearing behind trees, slipping behind trees, like ghosts behind ghosts. A flash to his left, then pain, a scream from Rex, sharp and short. John spun, heart hammering. He saw the shape tumble, Rex's body colliding with a figure mid-run, both of them slamming into the underbrush. Then silence. "Rex," John shouted, voice raw, forgetting all protocol. No answer. He charged forward, firing twice in the air to push any remaining agents back. The scent of blood hit him before the sight did. He found Rex in a shallow ditch, limp but breathing. One paw twisted awkwardly, side torn just above the rib. Blood soaked into the leaves, but it wasn't the color that made John freeze. It was the texture. Thicker than normal, slightly darker, and John knelt, ripping his jacket off to press it against the wound. As he did, he noticed something else. The blood reacted to air. Not in a natural way, this wasn't clotting. It hissed slightly at the edge, a chemical reaction almost invisible but undeniable. Tiny flecks sparkled under moonlight. John stared. What the hell did they do to you? He tore the jacket open further and saw beneath the clean, surgical, and not from any battlefield John remembered. He checked the other side. Another, symmetrical. His breath left him. This wasn't just about neural programming or memory retention. They had implanted something, biotech, accelerants, data storage. The blood wasn't blood anymore, it was a container, a carrier, and the more John stared, the more his mind connected the dots he didn't want to face. Rex wasn't just a dog who'd escaped. He was evidence. Biological proof of a program so secret even the handlers weren't told the final phase. That's why they wanted him erased. Not recovered, not retrained. Destroyed. Rex stirred, eyes barely open. John gripped his paw. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're not going anywhere, not again." But deep inside, something turned cold. Because if he had figured this out from a scar and a drop of blood, then they already knew exactly what Rex was carrying. And they wouldn't stop now. Not until they'd finished what they started. The snow came early that year, blanketing the mountains in a hush that muffled the sounds of both pursuit or pain. John carried Rex in his arms through the final half-mile of broken trail. Breath sharp in the cold, boots sliding over the slick earth. The dog was heavy with blood, his breathing shallow, yet he made no sound, no complaint, as though he too understood that silence was their last shield. Behind them, the woods still groaned with the echo of a battle unfinished. The special ops team had retreated, for now, but John knew it was only a matter of time before another came, with clearer orders, with no room for failure. By the time they reached the cabin, Rex had passed out from blood loss. John worked through the night, cleaning the wound, burning his last alcohol reserve to sterilize the edges, stitching what he could with trembling hands. When he finally collapsed into the chair beside the cot, Rex's chest rose just enough to give him hope. But the real damage wasn't only physical. John had seen the blood under magnification, had watched how it reacted to heat and light, how tiny metallic flecks pulsed like data signals trapped inside liquid. He had kept the vial in a lead box, buried beneath the floorboards, knowing full well it was the most dangerous thing in the house. He couldn't keep hiding, not anymore. 3 days later, he loaded the vial, the field reports, and most damning of all, the audio drive. An old encrypted file he had found embedded in Rex's training logs. Misfiled under K9_pulse_tolerance_V2. The file contained nothing but a looped sound, no commands, no handler presence, only pain, raw, constant, unforgivable. John uploaded the file. He didn't go through back channels. He sent it directly to the Oversight Committee's secure server, flagged with his old unit code and clearance still tied to a Black Ops tag from Greyline's final year. It hit the inboxes of 4 senators and 2 investigative journalists in under 60 seconds. He didn't expect what came next. By sunrise, his satellite phone, military spokespeople refused comment. Former tech contractors came forward anonymously. Within 48 hours, the name Project Greyline had trended worldwide, joined by thousands of other veterans and canine handlers who began posting about phantom dogs, disappeared units, and training sessions that went dark without explanation. Then came the video. John hadn't filmed it. It came from a hunter's trail cam set up near the cabin. Grainy, silent, shot at night under heavy snowfall, but unmistakable. It showed a large German shepherd crawling alone through the storm, dragging one leg behind, blood streaking the snow in slow arcs. It showed him pausing at the edge of a clearing, eyes barely open, before continuing through the thick powder toward a wooden cabin half buried under white. The final frame captured Rex reaching the steps and collapsing, nose resting on the lowest plank, tail barely flicking. No music, no commentary, just 18 seconds. The clip went viral in under a day. They titled it, "The Crawl Home." Within a week, it had been viewed over 60 million times. Memorial pages sprang up, some assuming Rex had died, others calling him the symbol of the silent war. PTSD survivors began reposting the clip with captions like, This is how it feels to come back, or even the strongest crawl sometimes. John watched all of it from the same chair beside Rex's cot. Laptop propped on his knees, heart torn between horror and awe. He hadn't asked for any of this. He'd only wanted truth. But the world was hungry for something real, something brave, something bleeding but not broken. Then, one night, the door creaked open slowly. A woman in uniform stepped in. Not armed, not flanked. She introduced herself as Captain Ellis, former JAG, now attached to the Congressional Investigation Unit formed in response to the Gray Line leak. She asked no questions at first, only looked at Rex. The committee. They've seen everything. The logs, the video, the file. John said nothing. She continued. The colonel in charge of the program, Harlan Pike, retired with honors 3 years ago. They never knew what he authorized beneath the field ops. But now they do. And they need someone to testify. No, she replied, but you're a soldier. And your dog is the last living witness. John glanced at Rex. Rex stared back, silent, still loyal. The spring came late that year, as if the forest itself had needed time to mourn, to thaw its frozen pain before allowing life to bloom again. The snow melted slow and stubborn, revealing patches of green like bruises healing over time. The cabin, once a place of retreat and silence, now stood alive with motion. Birds nested in the eaves. Wind chimes clinked on the porch, and inside the air smelled not just of wood smoke and earth, but of something else. John stood by the window, sipping coffee he hadn't burned, eyes clearer than they'd been in a decade. He no longer jumped at wind through trees. No longer saw shapes and shadows. His nightmares still came, but they ended differently now. He didn't wake up screaming Tylee. And sometimes, he woke up whispering a name. And sometimes, when he did, there was a warm body curled at his feet, a steady heartbeat reminding him that he hadn't imagined it all. Rex lay sprawled near the hearth, his chest rising slow and even, one eye closed for good now, the other sharp as ever. The scar above his brow was thick, but he wore it like a badge, not a wound. The wound had already healed elsewhere. In the silence between him and John, in the trust rebuilt not by words but through presence, over time. The military had done something John never thought possible. After the national outcry, after the hearings and exposés and press conferences, they launched a new division, one aimed not at suppression but redemption. Operation Echo Shield, a support program for veterans suffering from treatment-resistant PTSD, pairing them with rehabilitated K-9 units who'd survived war and testing. No sedation, no reprogramming, no more secrets. John was invited to the opening ceremony, but he almost didn't go until the letter arrived. It wasn't official, just a handwritten note, slipped into the mailbox with no return address. You walked through fire once, now teach others how to walk out. But the brass shook his head and took the drive back to the base he hadn't seen since they lied to him about Rex's Adiation. But this time, there were no lies. The brass shook his hand. Young soldiers saluted him, not for rank but for what he had carried and survived. And when they asked if he would consider being the veteran liaison for Echo Shield, another was found tied to a post in an empty barrack, forgotten during a hasty evacuation. The last had never seen combat, but bore anxiety from months in a training cage too small to stand. Rex didn't bark orders, he didn't command, he showed. He let them follow him through the forest, over logs, through streams. He let them mimic the way he watched John, the way he stayed silent until the wind changed, and when they misstepped, he didn't correct with teeth or growls. He simply paused, waited, and tried again. John built a small training circle behind the cabin, nothing formal. He worked with the dogs in the morning, the vets in the afternoon, and every evening he sat on the porch with Rex beside him, watching the sun bleed across the horizon, wondering how something so broken could glow so gently. The nightmares still came, the darkness still whispered, but now, there was light waiting at the end, and not just for him. One evening, a young vet named Miles, 24, pale from meds, shaking from memory, asked John why Rex didn't flinch during thunder. John chuckled softly, because he already survived worse. Miles looked down at the smallest canine, a tan pup still afraid of its own bark. Think mine ever will? John leaned back, eyes drifting toward the treetops. Only one way to find out. Keep showing up. There was no ceremony to mark the loop closing. No parade, no last salute, just small things. The sound of paws across dry leaves. The quiet hiss of coffee shared between men who'd forgotten how to speak. The sunrise rising one more time. And a man who used to be lost, now walking the same forest path he once stumbled through, not alone this time, but with a shadow beside him. A scarred dog with one eye and a heart that never stopped coming back. If this story moved something deep inside you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more cinematic storytelling like this. What was the moment that hit you the hardest? Was it when Rex dragged himself through the snow? Or when John finally whispered his name again after all those years? Would you have opened the door? Or doubted your own mind like John did? Let me know your thoughts in the comment. And if you believe in second chances, for people and for dogs, drop a God bless Rex below. I read every word.